As the chair of our Rotary Peace Building Club, Heidi's visionary leadership has led to the installation of 120 peace balls in school and private and public places, serving as powerful symbols of peace. In collaboration with 50 dedicated members, Heidi continues to inspire positive changes and harmony in our community. Today, Heidi will speak about the history of the women of Rotary Adelaide. Rotarians and guests, please welcome Heidi to the stage.
Thank you very much, Rasha, and hello to everybody. Now, I've only got a few minutes to do this, so it's going to be a very short history of the Rotary Club of Adelaide. And I haven't got all of my notes with me today, so a lot of it's going to be a bit of ad lib because I'm a bit of a historical figure of the Rotary Club of Adelaide now because I've been a member for about 14 years, so which in terms of women in Rotary is relatively significant. So this year we are celebrating a significant milestone, and that is the 100 years since the starting of the Rotary movement in South Australia and of the start of the Rotary Club of Adelaide. So we were the first Rotary Club in South Australia. So 100 years ago. But specifically today, I want to acknowledge the 33 years that women have been a part of Rotary. For many years, behind the scenes, wives, children, secretaries really supported the men of Rotary. And I want to start off by acknowledging them. And I've been told by members of this club, some of our older males, that it was often them who were the hidden secretaries, treasurers, chairs, minute takers, and presidents of the club. But of course, in the 100-year history that we have, they're not often mentioned. So I do want to recognise all of those women and many of them who are here today, who continue to be the backbone. Behind every good man is a good woman, but also behind every good woman can be a good man too. So it works both ways. When I joined Rotary in 2009, I think I was one of about 12 women in this club, and there were about 200 members. The very first female member of our club was the Honourable Justice Cameron Murray, and Cameron was still a member when I joined. And I look back now and think, how privileged was I to meet this woman who was a real trailblazer. She was the first married woman to be allowed to be a partner in a law firm. She was the second female judge in Australia. And when I joined this club, she was still working, and really was one of the most incredibly dynamic women I've ever met. And she was always so colourful. She was always dressed in really colourful clothing, and her hair was just always magnificent. So, Camry, I honour you today. There were also some other females who were in this club who are still here today when I joined. And they are our current members, Di Wilkins, Elizabeth Clare, Sylvia Footner, Carol Proctor, Elizabeth Davis, Janet Patton, and Madeline Weiser. So what's that, about 6 or 7? And then there were about another 6, I suppose, women and I think they've probably all passed away now. Others of our current members, like Kay Dowling and Rafaela Oss, were Rotarians but active in other clubs at that time. As time went on, women came and went. And you'll see in some of the photos some of the wonderful giving women who have been past members of our club. And a lot of you today will remember these women. So they've all made up and been a part of the history of the Rotary Club of Adelaide. And there's 3 of us who are still members today in our younger days. Is Sylvia here today? Oh, there she is. I love that photo of you, Sylvia. I don't know how long ago it was taken, but Don't you look gorgeous? I wanted to just show you also this photograph. So every year we have a past president's dinner. And given there have only been 2 women who have been presidents of this club, we're sort of still a bit flanked by the men. But also wanted to acknowledge another female who's a member of our club, Julie Johnson. I think, Julie, are you here today? Who has been a president of another club. So she also attends those past presidents' dinners. So, women who have been president of the club. Bev Fairweather in 2006 was the first female to be a member of the president of our club. And then 13 years later, I had the absolute privilege and honour to be the second president. And we have Gildy Carty, who will become the 3rd female president of our club in about 18 months' time. So I think we're going to have a lot more women presidents from now on. And the great thing about having women as joining Rotary is that they don't come alone. They come in pairs often. We have mothers and daughters who are members of this club together. There's Kate and her mum, Alexandra, and Janine with her daughter, Elizabeth. They also come with their husbands who also join the Rotary Club of Adelaide. So we have 3 couples, married couples, who are members of our club. Helen and Grant, Joe and Greg, Priyanka and Homs. And they also come together as sisters, Carol and Suzanne. They bring their children, which is wonderful. We gather together as friends. We help build peace in all of our activities and attend international conferences together. We have lots of fun and laughter. And I think we can, just looking at the photos of these women, when I was looking back at photographs over the past 33 years, I saw a real change in the photos of this club. And when I joined, when I was in my early 40s, I never, yes, sometimes I may have been one, maybe only one of 6 people, women in the room of 200. It never daunted me, and I never really noticed it because the men of this club were always so welcoming and warm and wonderful mentors. So, but once more women started joining, you can't be what you can't see. It really inspired many other women to join. So I'm really happy to now say that about 30% of our membership is women. We have 42 female members of the Rotary Club of Adelaide, which is probably the largest number of women in a Rotary Club in Australia. So well done. The colour and the joy that the women bring to this club, I honestly wouldn't know what we would do without them. And here's just a quick little collage of some of our current, or actually all of our current female members. And you'll recognise most of these faces are here today. I mean, goodness me, can you see this happening at a Rotary meeting 35 years ago? That's the wonderful thing about inclusion. You never know what it's going to bring, but I can guarantee you we wouldn't be as dynamic, and we wouldn't be having such a wonderful event like this today. So with that, it's time for me to wrap up. Thank you so much to all the wonderful women of Rotary Adelaide for all that you do. And you really are people of action. I think every member of every female member of our club is involved in a service project. And we really couldn't do without you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heidi. I am humbled to be actually part of Rotary Adelaide. It was a dream and it happened. And when I got my pin, I was actually one of my grand moments. So Thank you for being another woman in the club. Dr. Keira Lindsey is South Australian history advocate at the History Trust of South Australia, where she serves as the principal spokesperson on South Australian history. Kiera guides the sharing of South Australia's diverse story to bring our history into focus for present and future generations to give the past a future now. Kiera is also an acclaimed author and creative historian who specializes in developing imaginative but ethical ways of representing those who might otherwise remain shadowy in the historical record. She has been enthusiastically deepening our interest and understanding of the past through books, articles, public presentations, and workshops, radio and television for over 20 years. Today, she will inspire you with her tale about heroic women in South Australian history. Sh- As she brings their stories to life through her talk on the heroine's journey, how women inspire women generation to generation. Rotarians and guests, please give a warm welcome to our next speaker, Dr. Keira Lindsey.
Do I just go? Okay, well, I might just start because I know how precious time is and fellowship as well. So, firstly, I would like to say how deeply honoured I am. What a joy it is to be here on such a gorgeous day and in such a truly important occasion. And what a privilege it is to share fellowship with all you gorgeous pink and purple Rotarians. Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge what a privilege it is for us to be gathering here together on Kaurna country, the Adelaide Plains, a place where elders have been teaching their younger people about culture and community for millennia. And that's kind of what we do here, care for country, care for community as well, I think. This is what you do at Rotary. So that long tradition is one that we get to participate in as well. So, despite our technical glitches, we shall persist because I am woman, hear me wrong. I've spent much of my life wondering about women and their place in the past. Having been brought up on stories of adventurers and explorers, of politicians and pioneers, I had a sense of the past as a place inhabited by horse galloping bushmen and top hatted gentlemen, where women were consigned to wearing bonnets and making butter at home. Therefore, much of my childhood I was spent chafing against what felt like the extremely limited future. Great. Okay. Okay, we're moving back now. How's that? Can everybody hear me okay? Bring them together. All right. You'll be sorry about that. Thank you. Okay, we're ready to rock and roll again. So I spent much of my childhood chafing against what felt to me like the extremely limited future which awaited me. For unless I managed to be somehow truly exceptional, like, say, perhaps Catherine Helen Spence, I believed that I had little chance of making a contribution, let alone making a mark. As I grew older, I was struck by what seemed to be a yawning gap between those demure, bonnet-wearing, butter-making creatures who had accepted their lot and the bold, even brash creatures like Germaine Greer and Helen Reddy, who were still singing I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar when I was coming of age. Both seemed like somehow to be aberrations from the women that had come before, that I struggled to make sense of it, even though I hoped one day that I might be courageous enough to take up the trail that they had blazed. It wasn't until I became a historian that I realised that there had always been strong women. Although this realisation imbued me with a sense of belonging to a long tradition of women who had the courage to think for themselves and live by their convictions,
It also revealed to me the extent to which women had been obscured, sometimes even deliberately omitted from the historical record, which had been produced by those with the education to read and write and the economics to own paper and pen. Even when a woman was fortunate enough to possess those sort of elements, what she produced was often deemed unworthy of preservation. And so women's records are very, very often lost from the record. Furthermore, most of those women who did make it into history have done so because they got into the sort of trouble that landed them in the newspapers or the courts or institutions where their stories were told by male policemen, by male judges, reporters, and administrators, intent upon preserving the status quo. Very often, all that remains of these women is their moment of crisis, meaning that it's almost impossible to learn anything about their aspirations, their attitudes, let alone their achievements. The past we inherited is thus skewed. Women are rarely or fairly included in it, to riff on the theme of International Women's Day this year, that is, inclusion. This lack of inclusion in history impacts on us all, for history is like a tree. It can provide us with shelter during the storms, shade during the heat, as long as its roots are able to drill down into the earth to drink from nutrient-rich water. If that water isn't nourishing, if it lacks vital ingredients, the tree has a problem, and so do we. I've spent the last decade or so developing techniques which address this imbalance in the archive by peopling the past with those who would probably otherwise, or who might otherwise, remain shadowy, perhaps even silent. Having selected a woman to write about, typically for the fact that her scanty sources suggest that there might be something interesting going on in there, I begin by poring over every possible snippet and fragment that I can find, looking for clues about her appearance, her attitudes, her voice, her motivations. I then use what historian E.P. Thompson described as the discipline of context to situate this woman in her world. I seek out everything from the boots and buttons she might have worn, the people and events that were part of her everyday life, tensions relating to religion, economics and cultures, and the larger sweep of political and social age ideas which shaped her age and her. As I weave these together, I speculate about the silences in her record, using my research to inform my imagination so that I can re-present her in an intricate and intimate portrait which evokes something of her individuality and her agency. To me, this is an act of inclusion, which demonstrates that women have always been distinctive and dimensioned. Most importantly, if I can show how they were able to exercise their agency then it reminds us that we can do so now, and we continue to do so well into the future. What I love the most about writing women back into the past is the opportunity to look through a life into life itself. Very often, these portraits are like portals that take us into a different world than that which we can see through the official record. Take, for example, these two South Australian women from our early 19th century past. The first is almost certainly wearing a bonnet, as it is a very hot day in late 1836. She is 25 years old, and if one of the few surviving sketches thought to be of her is accurate, she has a long nose and a striking face. Hopefully, both are now shielded from the sun as she stands on deck beside her partner and her two younger brothers. The wooden brig is making its way down Yurta-Bulti, the tidal estuary, which the Ghana have called the land of sleep and death for millennia. And as she is the very first European woman to do so, she is no doubt taking in the rich ecosystem of mangroves, seagrass, and dolphins and waterbirds. Perhaps Wilto Yurlo, the sea eagle, is flying above as dolphins slip in and out of the silvery stream, and Ghana are gathering kakari, Black River mussels from what will soon also become known as the Port Adelaide River. Thanks to the careful work of State Librarian Isabel Story, we now know that Maria Gandhi, our woman in the bonnet, was of humble working class stock and the eldest of 8 children. She probably met Colonel William Light in the early 1830s when he had returned to London from Egypt, hoping to be appointed the governor of the new colony of South Australia. At the time, Light was fleeing a disastrous second marriage to the beautiful Mary Bennett, but as she had taken most of his money before leaving him for another man, he was in no position to secure a divorce. Although Gandhi became Light's housekeeper in England, by the time the pair had set sail for the new colony, the crew and passengers on board the Rapid considered her the Colonel's companion. In this capacity, Maria supported South Australia's first Surveyor General as he struggled with uneven health and the bitter political dispute associated with the location of Adelaide. After Light resigned his official post and exposed them all to the family to financial precarity, she continued to support him. And again, when their hut burnt down and they lost all their possessions, he said, but the very clothes that we were wearing, she accompanied the Colonel down Hindley Street to buy household utensils. All the while, she suffered intense shame and social ostracism from the respectable citizens of the new colony who condemned her as little more than a concubine. And then in 1839, she endured the intense physical and emotional demands of caring for Colonel Light as he succumbed to consumption. Such devotion might explain why Colonel Light made her the sole executrix of her will. With the land and the house that she inherited, Maria made a respectable match with Dr. George Mayo, with whom she had 4 children, 3 of whom survived her when she too died of consumption in December 1847. So this is the cottage where Colonel Light died. But this unfinished sketch by Colonel Light of a tall, unnamed woman sitting side saddle, chin resting on one hand and crop in the other, may be one of the few historical remains that we have of Maria Gandhi. Other than the legacy of her children, that is, which include her grandchildren, the respected medical doctor and educator Helen Mayo, who co-founded the School for Mothers in 1909 to ensure they received sufficient advice on infant health. And then in 1927, Helen Mayo established the very effective Mothers and Baby Health Association, initiatives which I suspect may be close to the heart of our second speaker. In 1935, after almost a century after her grandmother arrived in South Australia, Helen Mayo was awarded an OBE, something that would have astounded those respectable colonists who refused to visit the Colonel and his concubine. The Australian Dictionary of Biography describes Helen Mayo in this way. She was a progressive woman of forceful views. She was short and plump with curly hair, a round face, an alert expression, with a deep, rich voice and an infectious laugh and a bustling manner. She preferred sensible English clothes. She had a brusque and bustling manner. Unmarried, she shared a North Adelaide home with her partner, Dr. Constance Finlayson, and during the 4 decades that she served maternal and child welfare, she oversaw a 60% reduction in infant mortality. What a woman. Although our first heroine comes to us in a bonnet, our second was most certainly not wearing one the day that she married Thomas Adams, an English shepherd, at the registry office in Adelaide on the 27th of January 1848. This was less than 2 months after Maria Gandhi had died. Nonetheless, the nature of this marriage was considered so extraordinary that the press attended so that they could witness Kudnato, a Ghana Najeri woman, become the first Aboriginal woman to marry a European in South Australia. Their reports reveal that 16-year-old Kudnato wore her hair carefully dressed that her whole appearance was one of cleanliness and comfort, while her pleasing expression convinced the reporters that the groom was a lucky swain indeed. Thanks to her marriage, Kudnato became the first Aboriginal woman to be granted Aboriginal reserve land, which she did according to legislation specifically designed to give Aboriginal women and their children the right to occupy and use land in South Australia, although their husbands were denied that right if their wives died. The Adams family therefore took up 81 acres near Auburn in the Clare Valley, in an area known as Section 346, where Kudnato eventually gave birth to 2 sons. Despite the law making a provision for the land to go to Kudnato's children, when she died suddenly in February 1855, her husbands and sons lost the right to occupy Section 346. And as Adams felt unable to care for the young boys, he took them to Penindi Mission near Port Lincoln, where they eventually raised large families and became known as excellent shearers, ploughers, and cricket players. Although we know so little about Kudnati, like Maria, her legacy can be traced through her descendants, who include many prominent Ghana figures like Uncle Lewis O'Brien and AFL player Michael O'Loughlin. But today I want to focus on Kudnato's great-great-granddaughter, Gladys Elphick. Trained as a midwife according to traditional ways, Gladys took on various jobs across the state before returning to Adelaide in 1939, just a few years after Helen Mayo got her OBE. Over the coming decades, Gladys became active in Aboriginal Advancement League of South Australia, also establishing the Council for Aboriginal Women in South Australia. And there she helped to set up a women's shelter, a health service, a legal aid, and a kindergarten. Again, work close to our next speaker's heart, I believe. In 1971, Gladys received a member of the Order of the British Empire, and in 1977 established the Aboriginal Medical Service. Extraordinary achievements. According to the Australian Dictionary of Biography, Auntie Glad, as she was known to many, also Wilto Yurlo, the sea eagle, possessed a lively sense of humour and a shrewd personality that pierced through the humbug. And there she is. These brief glimpses into 4 South Australian women lead me to wonder about what you and I will leave behind. So I want to conclude with a quote, but first a question which invites you to reflect upon future generations, what might make of your story when and if the time comes. In contrast to Maria and Kudnato, we now leave a wake of documents linked to tax files and Medicare reports, let alone all those emails, those Twitters and social media posts. Life seems to race by at a dizzying pace as we continue to generate images of ourselves, what we eat, our holidays, our loved ones, often in that order. I fear the problem for future historians will not be the absence of the record, but its overabundance. They will need solid skills of discernment to sort through all that stuff and find us. But the stories of these 4 women to me suggest that although legacy can be less tangible, it can often be more enduring than the historical record. Is it not possible, for example, that Maria Gandhi's influence can be traced through Helen Mayo, not just through her achievements, but that infectious laugh? Likewise, perhaps Kudnato's compelling character continued to find expression via Auntie Glad's shrewd personality and wicked sense of humour. These possibilities remind me that we're never alone and that we can draw on our ancestors to become the authors of our lives and our stories. And now for that quote, which is often attributed to Nelson Mandela, but it actually comes from a woman, Marianne Williamson, an American writer, politician, and practitioner of A Course of Miracles. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, writes Williamson. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond all measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, to be gorgeous, to be talented, to be fabulous? Actually, Who are you not to be? Your playing small does not serve the world. As we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. For me, this is the promise of International Women's Day and of Rotary. To come together, all of us, men and women, to encourage one another, not to play small, to connect, to collaborate, to contribute, to urge one another to be all that we can be, which, like the women I've spoken about today and yourselves, is, of course, brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Keira. I love the affirmations. They are my type of words, so I love them. We would like now to welcome our last speaker. Professor Maria Makrides is an international leader in maternal infant nutrition with a focus on optimizing the cognition, growth, and immune development of children. She is currently the Executive Director of South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute and has dedicated her working life to improving the nutrition and health of mothers and their babies by conducting and translating high quality research. Maria's work has been responsible for changes in international policy regarding the safe composition of infant foods, national and international guidance on diet and supplementation during pregnancy, and infant feeding guidelines to minimize risk of childhood allergies. She's an elected fellow of Australian Academy of Science and the Australian Academy of Health and Medical Sciences. Maria was awarded South Australian Scientist in the year 2022. Today, Maria will speak about her life and her work in her talk on Mother Knows Best. I love it. A tale of improving nutrition for women and their children. Rotarians and guests, please give a warm welcome to Professor Maria Makrides.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Ganamirana, Ganayata, Nai Tampanti. And I too acknowledge that we are the Ghana people and that we are on Ghana land, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. It is an absolute pleasure to be here and to share with you some of the work that I have done and my story since coming to South Australia from Melbourne in 1989. I came as a fresh-faced graduate with a science degree, thinking that I really wanted to do nutrition and dietetics. Took the course at Flinders, and then by the end of the course thought, well, I really like this nutrition stuff, but I think I can make a better contribution if I did the research side and created the evidence to change the practice and not just go with the dogma. And even sometimes when we knew about the dogma and our mothers said that, you know, fish is brain food and eggs are good for you, and you feed babies brains and liver, and that was okay. We didn't actually quite know why and understand the full nutritional profile there. So I embarked on a PhD, and at the time there was a lot of interest in these omega-3 fats and the differences between breast milk and infant formula. And breast milk had all these omega-3 fats in them, the fish oil type fats, and the infant formulas of the day were largely devoid of these fats. And there was this hypothesis that maybe that was one of the reasons when people did studies comparing the outcomes of breast and formula-fed babies, that the breastfed babies did a bit better than the formula-fed babies. So in true scientific endeavour. The first study that I undertook was actually to try and work out whether we could actually prove this in babies that were born healthy and at term. So we recruited babies from Adelaide, mothers who chose to formula feed their babies and randomly allocated them to a standard infant formula or one that had added fish oil in it. We also recruited breastfed babies. And we collectively developed this way of measuring the maturity of visual pathways by showing these 4-month-old babies who had been fed these different diets, different checkerboard patterns of different sizes, and measured the responses off the back of their heads to see what they were able to respond to. And there was, and so the babies who were fed breast milk or got the fish oil supplemented formula were able to respond on their EEG to smaller checkerboard patterns than babies who were fed the formulas of the day. And that was actually the first study in term babies to show that there was a physiological or a functional difference that was linked to a nutrient. And that started a whole lot of other studies that we continued here in Adelaide, but many, at least 40 or 50 such similar studies around the world. What we then went on to work out was whether you had to have the fish oil type fats or whether it was okay to have the omega-3 fats that were the vegetable sources like you find in linseed oil. We eventually showed that for healthy term babies, if the omega-3 source was a vegetable source, like a linseed oil that was added to the formula, that was okay, and that was as good as adding the fish oil directly. So by the year 2002, the collective work that we had done here in Adelaide as well as around the world, the infant formula regulations internationally changed to mandate a minimum level of the vegetable type of omega-3 fatty acids and to allow the optional addition of these fish oil type fats. And that mandate has improved the quality of infant formula that's sold internationally. And that mandate is relevant to 188 countries around the world, as well as all of the countries in the European Union. So that, I think, was from work that came out of Adelaide. So I think we can all be really proud of that. And then people started getting interested in pregnancy. Well, you know, a lot of the brain development happens in that last trimester of pregnancy. So what do we need to be doing for pregnant women? So we started a new study with over 2,500 women. Again, most of them recruited in Adelaide, some in Melbourne and some in Perth. So across the bottom part of Australia, to actually see whether did pregnant women need extra of these omega-3 fatty acids to support the development of their children. And we followed all the children out to 8 years of age. The answer was a big fat no. Basically, the mother does a great job of actually delivering what is needed to be delivered through the placental supply, and there's no extra supplementation that's actually needed to support the development of the baby. So then we started asking questions around preterm babies. What about babies that are born early and might miss that in utero supply? And what we actually found there in a series of 2 major studies is that the babies that are born moderately early, there's short-term effects if you try and match what the baby would get if they were in the womb, but not really long-term effects. But if it was the very preterm babies, the ones that miss the whole of that last trimester of pregnancy, that it's really important to match in the neonatal unit what the baby would have received if it had stayed in the womb. And in that study that was only published last year, we showed that the babies who we're able to match the in utero supply that are born less than 29 weeks will have improved intelligence quotients out to 5 years of age. And that is hugely exciting because although we've had huge improvements in the way we care for very preterm babies, we've improved survival, improved other outcomes. The developmental outcomes of babies that are born very preterm still lags those that are born at term, and we haven't been able to make a dent in that for about 30 years. What we were able to do with by meeting their in utero rate was not make that deficit all up, but we shifted it about 30%. Now there's an Australian company out of Melbourne that's licensed the technology and is in the process of finalising regulatory approvals so that products can be available for very preterm babies in neonatal units. So if I then go back to that pregnancy study, because things are never linear, when we were doing that pregnancy study, there was a side twist. We thought at the time we better measure the outcomes of what happens with the fish oil supplementation to the pregnancy outcomes, because there was some really old data from the 1980s to suggest that perhaps fish oil type fats were actually important in determining the duration of gestation. Long behold, in that study, we had fewer preterm births, especially early preterm births, that were needing admission to the intensive care unit. And it really left us scratching our heads of whether this was really a fluke or a chance effect, because this study was really designed about baby neurodevelopmental outcomes, not pregnancy outcomes. So then we embarked on a new study, which was bigger and specifically designed to look at supplementation and the dose of omega-3 fatty acids that might be needed to optimise duration of pregnancy. This study involved over 5,500 women, and what we found was that if women had an adequate status or level of omega-3 fatty acids, they didn't need anything extra. But if they were low, then the supplementation was important to reduce both preterm and early preterm birth. And it was this study that actually was a core at helping change the Australian pregnancy care guidelines to suggest that women needed an adequate intake of omega-3 fatty acids during pregnancy. So then we started a bunch of implementation work. So now we have a program with SA Pathology in partnership to add an omega-3 test to routine antenatal screening in the first trimester to work out what a woman's status is. Because it might be because she metabolizes fats differently to someone else. It might not just be her intake. So women who screen low are actually advised to take supplementation so that hopefully we can see reductions in prematurity in the community. We're now starting to see that those first Australian guidelines, based largely on our work, are now having international impact, with an international group also making similar guidance, and the European Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology picking up those recommendations as well. And our colleagues in the northwest of England are in the process of emulating our pilot program that we have here in South Australia in partnership with SA Pathology. This all sounds really neat, doesn't it? But it's been a 30-odd year journey. And it's now amazing to be able to sit back and think about what made all this possible. And I come back to a point that Kiera made: don't be afraid to think big. As from a scientific point of view, do the studies that really need to be done to answer the question conclusively, and do them regardless of how complicated they are or how big they are. Find a way. Work with lots of people from diverse backgrounds and be as open and as generous as you can be. Sometimes you come across people that aren't equally open and generous, and that's okay. The people that you do find that are open and generous are the ones that are going to work with you and stay with you for the long haul. And expect that the journey will be long. It's not going to be an overnight success. It is going to take time, and you'll be surprised at who ends up being your best colleagues and with you on the journey for a long time. And for me, that's actually been people from many different diverse disciplines, because we've needed all the skills together to be able to make all of those things happen. It's been the midwives, it's been the doctors, it's actually been the statisticians who actually who helped avoid us made silly mistakes at the beginning. It's the lipid scientists, it's everybody along the way. And most importantly, it's been all the amazing families that have volunteered to be in these studies. And in preparing for this, I did a back of the envelope calculation and have estimated that over 20,000 families have participated in our studies over the last 30 odd years. And many of them have been with the studies for a long time, because we've followed their children till they've been 7 or 8 years old. And others have kept on coming back, and we've had different, they've been in different studies with different children or different pregnancies. And it's this collective generosity and altruism that I think makes Adelaide so special, and that together, with the contribution of the whole community, we've been able to make just a little dent in the universe and hopefully continue to improve the health outcomes of mothers and their children, not just here, but internationally. So thank you very much for your attention.